Hello. How are we all doing? Sorry that I was late. I was out I was out at the pub. So we're coming in hot today. We're coming in hot with some I had, let me just tell you guys, I had some of the worst wine of my life tonight. Worse than anything else you could have that I've had on the stream. Let me pop out chat real quick so I can see a bit. That's better. Yeah. How are we all doing? Sorry I'm slightly late. I was, before we get on to the terrible wine, I was at an event that was the end of term event for the students that in a class I teach with my or teach at the odd lesson with my supervisor, and it was their end of term kind of shindig. It wasn't red wine that was the worst wine. It was this white wine, and like normally the wine that the university provides is bad, but this was like something else. It looked like piss. Like white wine isn't supposed to look like that. The red wine was drinkable. The red wine was fine. The white wine was not. The white wine was like kind of orangey. Like it looked like piss, and it smelled like apple juice, which I don't know. Wines aren't supposed to, I'm not a wine connoisseur, as I'm sure anyone who comes to this stream is well aware. But I know that wine isn't supposed to smell like apple juice, but this wine did. It was fucking horrible. Yeah, it was really bad. But the red wine was drinkable. So I had a few glasses of that and a little pint. So we're coming in slightly hot. We're coming in a bit pre-lubricated. So hopefully off to a good start. How is everyone? Been sick but feeling a bit better? I'm glad you're feeling a bit better. I had a haircut and it was a bit odd, the haircut I had. It wasn't fake wine, it was just gross wine. The wine at Listy, I think... Should we just start with the wine? No, it was the colour... It was the colour of apple juice, it was the smell of apple juice. It didn't taste of apple juice though. It didn't taste of it didn't taste of cider. It tasted like polyester. It was weird. It was truly like I've never had a wine like it. Really bad. Yeah. I'll get to the haircut in a second because it was a weird haircut. Yeah, it was horrible. But let's take a look at. I was, because I was in town, I could go to the big Sainsbury's, which has had a larger supply of wine, and this was one of the ones that was on deal, and it's called Arrogant Frog. I didn't realise it was called Arrogant Frog when I bought it. I just noticed this now. Would I have not bought it if I'd known it was called Arrogant Frog? I probably would have still bought it. It was on deal. Arrogant Frog. Viognier. Yeah. That's something about wine. What's the flavour profile of Arrogant Frog? Let me do my wine voice. Arrogant Frog. Established. Oh, that's in French. I can't read that. Arrogant Frog is a wine that proudly embraces its Mediterranean origins, yet leaps out of the glass with a friendly and inviting New World attitude. Oh, I don't like that at all. To obtain the fruit-driven and unique style, that defines Arrogant Frog. Its creator, this very French name. Its creator, Jean-Claude Masse, the humble winemaker. This was in parentheses, the humble winemaker. Harvests grapes from the hillsides of the 5 main valleys of the region. The Aude, the Arbe, the Hérault, the Peine, and the Uzès Valley. This seafood fish curry... What? This voyageur comes from the Arbe Valley. We recommend that you serve it with seafood, fish, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so... Arrogant Frog, yeah, Arrogant Frog. Viogner is usually nice. Well, we'll be the judge of that. It leaps out of the glass, apparently. Unless this is really sweet. Let's take a look. Smells like wine. See, I can already tell from the colour of this that it's going to be better. It's going to be the best wine that I've had today. There's a microphone that's come out. It's going to be the best wine that I've had today, which is, yet again, not saying... this will be the third wine that I've had today. First being purely disgusting. The second being drinkable. The red wine was drinkable. So if this is slightly better than drinkable... then it will leap to the top of today's rankings in terms of wines. So let's take a look. Smells like wine. Yeah, that's okay. I'd say that was the best wine of the 3 I've had today. Better than the cheapest wine that they get. Oh, it's vegan. Okay. Lots of wine is vegan these days. Yeah. I'd say that was a solid 6 out of 10 for wines, which is like... That's like top 90% of wines that we've had on this stream. 6 out of 10. We're gonna say that's all right and the best that we've had today. I had a lot of colleagues at the office today because someone made a threat of violence on our main office building. They had to evacuate into mine. That sounds stressful. What? Why? Why was there a threat of violence? That doesn't sound like fun at all. Our office was being painted. That's not as bad. Yeah, before I kick off the stream with making a different tune to this one, which is already starting to slightly grate on me. I don't have much in the way of plan today as ever. We are I think since the last time I saw you guys, I've seen Dune, so we can talk about Dune. We can talk about next video plans. I'm going to write that next week, and if I do it quick enough, maybe record it so it's out for the first week of April. If not, it will be the following week. And we could talk about that, and we can chat about, anything that's on your mind. So that's fun. Not going to talk about X-Men. I've not seen it. I've not seen the X-Men TV show. So I can't comment on it. It looks fun. Looks like a fun wee TV show, and everyone says it's good. And I'll probably watch it at some point, if I can be bothered. Dune 2 was good. I liked Dune 2. We'll get into that in a second. Let's make a tune first, and then let's make a tune, and we can talk about Dune. Then we can talk about my weird haircut and slamming my fucking thumb into the goddamn dishwasher. If I can find my plectrum anywhere, because I seem to have dumped it down somewhere. Is it underneath the wine glass? Nope. Is it underneath the... there it is. Here's one thing that happened. My nice tea mug, the handle fell off, and I tried to fix it with glue, and it didn't work. And I'm really devastated about it. That's fun. That's fun. The drums made that. Alright, so I guess first things first. Hello Nick, Guitar Guy Nick, sorry. Read that entirely the wrong way around. How's it going? Yeah. So I guess first things first. The first thing that we were going to talk about this fucking. So I got a haircut today. This is just my own complaint. This is my complaining hour before we move on to things that are more interesting. It was the most bizarre haircut experience I've had in a while. Not the most bizarre haircut experience of my life, because that honour goes to Tony's barbers on Duke Street in Glasgow. That was weird. But like for people who get like men's haircuts in the chat, when you go in and you ask for like a numbered cut on the sides and then like shorter on top, like I normally ask for a couple inches off top. Almost always up until today, you do the sides first, right? Like you just shave the sides and then they cut the rest. They didn't do that this time. In the hairdresser I went to, the barbers, they did the top first. Tony's barber. I've told Tony's barber story before, but I'll tell it again. They started on the top and did all like just cutting off the top, and they cut it in this bizarre shape that was like a ramp. Like they made my hair I fixed it with gel and shit, but like they made my hair like it looked like you could drive a bike up it. It was weird. And then eventually they got round to the sides and they gave me like the most solid line of like non-tapered line I've ever had in terms of the back of my head. It was just the whole I was thrown off, and it was like the guy didn't seem to understand what I was saying either, because I'd asked for like a 6 on the sides a few times, and he was like, a number 2, and I was like, no, I don't want a number 2, I want a number 6, several times. And I wonder if he was like, he did the top because he wasn't exactly sure what I wanted. It was just weird. And then they didn't have cards, so I had to leave my stuff there and find a card machine to get money out to pay for it in the end. So I'm not unhappy with this haircut, I've got to say. The Tony's barber situation was funnier. Duke Street in Glasgow a few years ago. When was this? This would have been 2016. So about 8 years ago. I was living in Duke Street in Glasgow, and the Tony's barber, they did £5 haircuts. Amazing. £5, Tony, you've got my back. You got me. £5, absolutely. I will go into your establishment if you're saying you'll cut my hair for £5, 100%. This was when I was still finishing up my politics undergrad. And Tony asked me. He was like, he sat me down and he was like, "What do you want?" And I told him, same as I always get. And he was like, "Cool, no worries." And then Tony started talking to me, and he was like, "So what did you do?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm just I'm a student." And he was like, "Oh, what are you studying?" And I was like, politics." And he was like, "Oh, let me tell you about that." And I was like, "Oh no." And then Tony was like, Every politician is a bastard. And I was like, yeah, I'm on board with that, Tony. Yeah, 100%. Let's stick on this track. We'll be fine. So you don't want to be a politician? I was like, I don't want to be a politician. No, Tony, no. He was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know. At that point, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was like, oh, maybe like work in an NGO or something, work in a union. And he was like, fucking charities. I hate charities. And I was like, all right, Tony. No worries. He was like, tell you what's a charity. The Catholic Church. And I was like, oh, okay, Tony. Yeah, where are we going with this? And he was like, the nuns in the Catholic Church. And I was like, I have heard of them. I'm aware of the nuns in the Catholic Church. And he was like, those nuns, they're fucking bastards. And I was like, alright. And he was like, I went to one of those Catholic schools, charity status it was. The nuns there are sadistic. Bastards. And they used to abuse folk too. And I was like, okay. Alright. I was like 21 at this point. I was like 50-year-old Tony just like going at it. These bastard nuns. Evil bastards. I was like, yeah, alright. And he's like shaving away at my head. And he keeps going on like this, talking about the bastard nuns at his Catholic school. And how much he hated them and how much he hated the politicians. And then close to the end, like the end of the haircut comes along and he's like, do you want some gel in your hair? And I'm like, I want to get out of there quite quickly and I can do the gel myself. So I'm like, no, you're alright, Tony. And he was like, no, are you sure? Are you sure you don't want gel? You don't want gel in your hair? And I was like, nah man, I'm alright. I'm good. Don't worry about it. And he was like, are you sure? I was like, yeah. And he goes, because you've got a very weirdly shaped head. And I was like, alright. Thanks, Tony. I will bear that in mind as I figure out my hair for myself. And he goes, no, you've got a very strangely shaped crown. I was like, alright, okay, here's £5. Bye. And I went back a couple of times after that because it was £5 for a haircut, and that is not bad at all. None of the other times were with Tony himself. They were all just silent, but the haircut with Tony, the man himself, was an experience and a half. Yeah, I've never had someone be like, yeah, your head, fucked up. That head, that's a fucked up head. I've been looking at it for 10 minutes while I shave it, and let me tell you, fucked up. That you rarely see the top of your head, so you wouldn't know. But I just want to make sure that you have just an extra thing to be self-conscious about. You have a weird head. Alright, thanks Tony. I guess this is why this haircut is so cheap, because it takes, it's more than money. It's like emotional money that you give over. Like maybe Tony like sucks in like bits and pieces of your soul that you leave to him as he talks to you, like an energy vampire type of thing. Except like I left that invigorated because I was like, fucking hell, what a time I had with Tony. What an entertaining man he was. And cheap. Most importantly cheap. So, we love Tony, and we hope Tony has survived. And although inflation has been rising, and I'm sure the haircut's no longer £5, I do hope that it remains on that cheap side. The last time I got a haircut in London, I accidentally went to a place that cost 30 fucking quid. 30 fucking quid for a haircut. But the guy who did it was so pleased with his job, and it was nice that he knocked £10 off so that he could use my hair on his Instagram page, which was very nice. It was a better haircut, but it was more expensive. This one was not that. It was cheaper, but it was not great. So, sounds like he was gonna preempt. I mean, his haircut was fine. He did great. He gave me a normal haircut. everything was fine with Tony. He just wanted to tell me that my head was weird, and also tell me about the nuns that abused him in his childhood. Thanks, Tony. Great stuff. The haircut is £5, but the insult is free. I don't know. I feel like the insult maybe like I was giving him something, and that was part of the haircut experience. I mean, I would go back in a heartbeat, because again, £5. I'm not sure hair gel would fix a weird head anyway. Thanks. I do a good job. I think I style my hair to cover my apparently weird shaped crown just fine. The other major event that happened to me this week was trapping my thumb in the dishwasher, which is great. A real top moment for me. Decided I had to slam the dishwasher door shut. I don't know why I had to slam it, but I did. And as I was slamming it, I just put my thumb right in there. So it's been a stellar week for me in terms of events. You know what I'm gonna do? I rushed in here after coming back from the pub. I'm not taking my shoes off yet, so I'm gonna take my shoes off right now. Bear with me. Got sailor socks on that my mum got me for Christmas. She got me them because the socks were called Captain John socks. Because they were sailors and one of them was a captain. I don't know if this is Captain John. Am I wearing Captain John? I don't know. But it does mean that sometimes when I look down, I do have this face just staring at me, which is a little bit disconcerting. It's a little bit disconcerting. I hate when someone makes you feel like an idiot, and that someone is yourself, and there's no one else to blame. Yep. I did a similar thing once where I trapped my finger in a car door, where it was like, you know when you can see something happening? It's like, it's happening in slow motion, and you're like part of you is like, I could stop this. I could stop this thing from happening. But for some reason you can't. It's just happening so slowly. And I had that once, like, you know when you throw a car door shut? My thumb wasn't in, no, it was the opposite. I was opening. So my thumb wasn't in the door, it was in the other side, like the hinge. And I was opening it, and I could see my thumb being in the hinge of the door. And I could see the door come back and go to crush my thumb. And I remember thinking, like, I should move that thumb. But I couldn't. And then the whole hinge just cracked on my thumb, and I was like, everything about that was bad, and I'm going to regret all of this in a while. For the next few days. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to play the guitar, because it's obviously thumb stuff, but it's not too bad, it's alright. The mental hurt rivals the physical pain. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think the physical pain was definitely the worst part. My mental fortitude is apparently annoyingly fine. Yeah. So, what else has happened? Anything? What I'm trying. There are depressing things that I can think of to talk about, but we can leave them for the moment. We can talk about Dune 2, which I saw Dune 2. If I ever get the chance, am I going to talk about the possible latest James Bond? I mean, if Kill James Bond invites me on their fucking podcast, then maybe. But until then, there's absolutely zero interest that I have in the latest James Bond. I think, what's his name? Aaron Taylor Johnson. Seems like a very boring choice. I think those movies need to stop being made. They are. I think how tired Daniel Craig was with James Bond should be an indication to the rest of us that this is a franchise which needs to end. There's nothing interesting to say about it. There's nothing interesting to do with it. I think the most interesting thing that they could have done with it, they did in Casino Royale, and then that's probably about it. It's not a very interesting franchise, and I don't think everyone's always like, "Oh, cast a black James Bond." You're like, I don't think that would be good. I think the using of a black British figure to promote a character, an imperialist security services character, wouldn't be good. I think that would be weird. The politics of that would be weird and bad. And I think that, having a white person as this horrendous killing machine, and again, I don't think they should make any more. I think it being a legacy of like white people being these horrible imperial fucking forces, is the only way to. Yeah, exactly. Mithril saying for the next James Bond, goes and does a Marxism. If they're going to cast a black James Bond, the story should be James Bond dismantling the British security services and fomenting global revolution. Otherwise, you're just utilising a black identity to pursue a fucking imperialist politics. I don't want that shit. And I think it's insulting to black actors to constantly be like, yeah, you should be James Bond. Like, maybe they don't want to be fucking James Bond because it's a weird and bad role. You watched Star Wars Andor recently, and it was very good, but I don't think Disney will make something like it again. Yeah. Andor's great, and I really hope the second series is great. I hope that they've not fucked with Tony Gilroy too much and allowed him to make the conclusion to that story in a way that is as effective as that first series was, because that first series was fucking brilliant. And anyone who's on this channel can go back to my videos on Public Intellectual to see me talking about the value of that and communicating the idea of a organic intellectual, and the stuff like the stuff that's like part of the Highland clearances stuff. That's really interesting. Great shit. I did see in the material for the new Star Wars show, the one that Abby Thorne's going to be in, which is really exciting for Abby, and I really hope the show is good, because she's in it. But I did see that the showrunner of that was like, it has an Andor like narrative, and I was like, what does that mean? What does it mean to have an Andor like narrative? Do you mean that it's got intrigue, or do you mean that it's a complex, layered, character-driven story? Like, what does that mean? And I kind of suspect that it means that they know that that's the shit that fans want, so they're just saying it. Because they accidentally made a really good Star Wars show, and now they're going to try and replicate it by making another good Star Wars show. A James Bond movie from the perspective of the freedom fighters that James Bond is being dispatched to murder could be interesting. But they should, at the end of a movie with that perspective, kill James Bond, because that's the only way to actually go, is to kill James Bond. Any thoughts on what looks like the Disneyfication of Doctor Who? I've not seen. I don't know if there's a Disneyfication of Doctor Who. I've not seen any of the new season yet, aside from that Christmas episode, which looked just very standard Russell T Davies Christmas episode of Doctor Who. I don't know if there's a Disneyfication of Doctor Who. I'm not like. Oh, excuse me. The fact that they've got money is interesting. I wonder if it'll make it worse rather than better, because there has always been a kind of charm in the fact that Doctor Who is low budget. So you know, it's the fact they've got money isn't nothing. Like, that's not a nothing thing. It might make the show worse, the fact that they've got more money. But you know, maybe there's no Disneyfication. Bad sign to immediately compare rather than present something new. Yeah, I mean, in the show's defense, it could just that's likely just a marketer who's like a marketing department that's like, okay, fans, like, people have been like, this is the good Star Wars, so we better indicate that this is like Andor. But you know, it's a strange thing to say. It probably, it likely has nothing to do with the actual show itself, and I'll reserve judgment on the actual show until I've actually seen it. And again, I hope the show's good. And not every good Star Wars show has to be like Andor. Like I think the first two series of The Mandalorian are good. And they weren't like Andor. They were fun, episodic, like fun, and you know, that's fine. You don't have to. Things don't have to be like the other thing to be good. You hope Abby doesn't get attacked by critics. I hope so too. That would be nice. I'm sure Abby will be very good in the show. She's a good actor. She does good work. There's no reason to think that she wouldn't be. There will always be horrible transphobes who will hate the fact that there's a trans actor in the show. She knows how to deal with that. She is resilient like that. Yeah, even though she shouldn't have to be. But yeah, I hope the wider show is as good as I expect her to be in it. Thank you. My thumb says thank you. But yeah, Star Wars. I mean, Star Wars fans. I sometimes. Has anyone else ever come across Always Sunny in Philadelphia fandom? Hiya, Sanan. How's it going? We were just talking about how the new Star Wars looked, and I was just bringing up the Always Sunny in Philadelphia fandom, because I keep getting recommended that on my For You page on Twitter, and it's like the way that they approach that fandom approaches Always Sunny is like it's like a sort of Disney like Tumblr Disney shipping discourse, but for a show about the worst people in the world, and it's really bizarre. I can't tell how ironic it is or not, but there seems to be like legit like attempt to make Dennis Reynolds from Always Sunny a kind of tragic closeted figure who will end up in an end game relationship with Mac. And I read that stuff and I'm like, you guys love this show. You don't understand these characters. The notion that those two would end up in a relationship, even if both of them were fully gay, that just would not happen. This show is... These characters, that would not happen. Like, you don't understand these characters. And like... It's got Danny DeVito, how could it not have shipping? Yeah, exactly. Like, there's a whole lot of stuff like, analyzing the behavior of Dennis and Mac, and it's clear that Dennis is in love with Mac. And you're like, no. Very clearly in this show, Dennis cannot love. Dennis is a hollow man who loves control and loves if the end game of Always Sunny was to turn Dennis and Mac into a couple, that would be horrendous. That would be a horrible outcome for everyone, because Dennis is a evil man. In fact, they did an episode about them functionally being in a relationship and it drove them up the wall. They've done so many episodes about that. And about how Dennis is is basically incapable of actually loving people because he is evil. He is a bad, and Mac is also evil as well in a different way. And that's the point of the show, is that these are characters who make each other worse by being around each other. And then they make everyone else around them worse by being in the circumference of them. So turning it into this sort of ship fandom is bizarre. I get it if it's ironic, but it doesn't seem to be ironic. People and people that you don't want to have happy endings because they're terrible. The happiest ending for any character in Is Always Sunny is for them to leave and get a support network that makes sure they're not evil. Anything else is there's no way of those characters staying around in a relationship with each other that isn't destructive. For some reason the bit rate of the stream is lower than normal. I don't know what that means, but okay. As long as everything looks okay for everyone on stream, it seems to be looking okay on my monitor. But I was getting an indication that there was some problem. Yeah, I love Always Sunny is functionally a comfort show for me, in the sense that if there's nothing else on and I've got nothing I want to watch, I'll shove on some Always Sunny, either that or some fucking D&D thing. Speaking of which, Sinan's in the chat, and again, as always, we will every second week we do Dungeons and Dragons. Currently still on Twitch, but we'll be moving to YouTube soon enough. The last two episodes we killed not Keir Starmer, but a Keir Starmer, as in a functionary of a city, where the title is Keir Starmer. I fucked up by telling the Keir Starmer as I was killing him why I was killing him. But it all worked out fine. Sure, our employer tried to kill us, but we got out of it. It's okay. I officially made sure that my character was fully bisexual in that episode, fully flirting with the person who was trying to kill us. So that was good. And yeah, next episode we'll be moving on. Every second Thursday. Any Thursday I'm not streaming, we'll be doing D&D on SK the Crusaders Twitch, and then moving to YouTube soon enough. Did I watch the show The Boys, and what did I think of it? I like The Boys. The Boys is good. The Boys is in that similar category for me as the animated Scott Pilgrim versus the World show, in that the creators made this show, and there was a degree, like the first series of The Boys, there's like, it's not subtle by any means, but there's like a degree of subtext that you're expecting the audience to grab hold of, and then the audience, particularly the male audience, didn't grab that subtext. So the creators were like, we gotta make this more obvious, and they were like, and then they made everything, every fucking metaphor so obvious. They had a character called Stormfront who's a Nazi who uses the internet to be a Nazi, and has lightning powers, and fucks a man wearing a cape of the US flag, and they're like, you know, this isn't subtle enough, and I kind of felt like that was a similar sort of, you know, it's still fun. Things don't have to be subtle to be good, but you know, they're basically telling you what's going on. There's no subtlety to it, and I felt like that was the same with the animated Scott Pilgrim versus the World show, where the original movie, subtext went over the head of the particular, primarily male audience of that movie, where they were like, oh yeah, Scott Pilgrim is a good guy, even though the movie is like, Scott Pilgrim's not a good guy. So the show was like, how can we make it so obvious to everyone that Scott Pilgrim is not a good guy? And then throughout the course of the show, they're like, yeah, this is a pathetic individual who's not a good guy. Just to sort of rectify the idea. And so it's not, you know, that screenshot of people going like, I know folk who use subtext and they're all cowards. It's not that. It's like, I know folk who use subtext and they're so brave because using subtext means that a bunch of your audience aren't gonna understand the very obvious critique that you are making. So, you know, I like The Boys. It's not subtle. Dune 2, yes. So, I went to see Dune 2. I liked it. I thought it was the first time I've ever seen anything in IMAX. So that was an experience. It was beautiful as a movie. It was, everything about it was like beautiful. That I think particularly, I remember I was rewatching the first Dune, and like particularly, like the first Dune got criticised for things being beige, but I rewatched it. I was like, I don't think that's fair, because the way that the movie is lit, the way that they use light, both in the first and in the second one, are just really, like, it's just really good. So I like it. It was beautiful. It looked really good. I think that the notion. This is another movie where, like, this is another example, like The Boys, like Scott Pilgrim, where Denis Villeneuve and Frank Herbert, when he put out Dune, was like, and people were like, oh, Paul's a hero, and he had to be like, no. So Denis Villeneuve was like, okay, so we've got to make sure people don't think Paul's the hero. So it's very obvious that Paul is a bastard. And I think that was really effective, that the way that they did that. And I think particularly the character of Chani was really good as that was a good character for the development of, like, for the audience perspective and for communicating that perspective to us. As like, here's a character who's betraying everything in both a macro and a micro level, both every personal relationship he has and everything that, like, the people he claims to support stand for. That's all good. There are things like, I don't think the transition between one type of Paul, the main character, to the Paul who does the bad things, I don't think that was done enough. I don't think that was fleshed out enough to give it a proper, like, oomph. Like, it was all very sudden, and I think that was not. I think that could have been done better. And I think probably what happened is that there was a longer, in the section where Paul becomes the bad guy, like Anakin Skywalker. There's like a psychological flash sequence. Timothée Chalamet in the first Dune bored me to tears. The first Dune, every scene Oscar Isaac is in is elevated because Oscar Isaac acts fucking circles around everyone else around him. His charisma is just fucking brilliant. He's just wonderful. And like, Timothée Chalamet is just really dull in that. I've not read the Dune books, so I don't have a full, like, knowledge, but like, from what I know from talking to people, like, Paul is quite a boring character, so that might not necessarily be the fault of Chalamet. But Chalamet in the second movie is really good. Like, I've seen people like attacking Zendaya as well for her acting in the second movie. Zendaya's acting is very good. Like, every main character, every main performer, and everyone in that movie is doing fantastic work. Everyone's acting is great. Really good performances from everyone, which is like a credit to Denis Villeneuve for being able to elicit great performances as a director. Like, great stuff. He sells being every aspect of the character, even if the transition between those aspects isn't fleshed out enough. But yeah, what I think happened in the sort of flashing, like the sort of internalized sequence, which explains why this character becomes a shithead. I think probably there were aspects of that were cut out. I suspect that there was a longer sequence within that, which better explains why he's a shithead. But yeah, I think that transition from someone who's like, I just want to be part of this culture, to someone who's like, I want to lead these people, wasn't done great. And I think that's my main criticism with the movie. And the other major thing is, I think it's a function of the movie being of a book which is very difficult to make into a film. Meant that if I didn't have a lot of prior knowledge about the story and about who people were, and about basic things like, why is spice important in the world of Dune? If I didn't have that knowledge, I would find it a very confusing film, I think. And I kind of think that it's like an opening scroll would be, like a Star Wars style opening scroll would be useful in a film like Dune, to be like, okay, so here we have here's a desert planet. The reason this is important is because, like, people need this spice to navigate the stars, and the people who control this control space travel. And I know that was a bit in the first Dune, but it wasn't reminded in the second Dune, so you kind of need that to be like, to ground you as to why people actually give a fuck about this desert planet. Why is everyone trying to invade it? What are the dynamics at play? That's something that's useful. And if I didn't know that shit going in, I think I'd have been confused as all hell about why anyone gives a shit about this planet. Because when you're looking at it through like just a completely individual pieces of art, if you looked at Dune 2 and you watched it without having seen or heard about anything, you'd be like, what the fuck is happening? Why is this important? What are they mining? What the fuck is going on? And I think that is a problem with the film, which is solved if you know what's going on and you can enjoy the film by just looking shit up or talking to folk. But it felt like something I would think was a problem if I didn't know that shit. Like, and it wouldn't have taken long to just be like Dune. We returned to fucking Dune, the Dune planet, and reminder to everyone: this planet is important because the thing that allows people to travel between planets is here. Done, easy. And it's the thing that allows people to travel between planets is the dead sandworms, and that explains why the water of life stuff comes from sandworms. Okay, that all makes sense. We understand that now. Cool. Moving forward. And I don't think it would necessarily, like, it doesn't break anything with the movie. Yeah. But, you know, I would have given it about 7 out of 10 as well. I wouldn't call it mid. I saw your provocative title of your video, Sinan, saying Dune 2 is mid. I would say it was very good. And I remember thinking that I didn't like the first Dune very much. And then when I rewatched it just recently in preparation to watch Dune 2, I liked it a lot more the second time I watched it. And I wonder if that will happen again if I watch Dune 2 again. Like if I'll appreciate bits and pieces. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll change cinema. I think it's a really good movie in the sense. I think it's the way it looks is so much better than most other sci-fi that's been produced, because most other sci-fi that's been produced recently has been fucking Marvel shit. You compare Dune to Marvel stuff, you're like, this is incredible. It's a really, everything Denis Villeneuve does is incredible. Like, he is, if someone was to say, name a director, I'm not one for like fawning over directors, but if you could name a director whose movies that you love, then I would be him. Like, Arrival is one of my favourite ever movies, and Blade Runner, so is Blade Runner 2042. So like, that's the guy who knows how to make fucking movies. And there are things like Rebecca Ferguson's character. Fucking brilliant. She was amazing in that movie. Then she was creepy, and she did some great stuff. And like the criticism that it's always funny to me when people are like, Dune is Orientalist, and then they discount it as a piece of art because of that. Because you're like, yeah, Dune is Orientalist, but it's Orientalist in a specific way, which is interesting, and has produced something that is quite interesting. Like, Frank Herbert's vision of Orientalism is like, it's not it's like he fetishizes these cultures and extracts things from them, but consciously tries to be on their side. Whether he succeeds at being all on their side or not is a different question. But his Orientalism is like connected with the fact that he wants to be on their side, to be like, yeah, these empires are actually fucked and they're bad, and the idea of like a Lawrence of Arabia, of a white savior, is fucked, and these people are not your friends, and like the way he sort of interacts with that is really interesting and produces something that's like weird and not politically like sound, but like politically interesting, and like opens you up to interesting bits of art and bits of media. Yeah, like there's lots of like interesting work about Dune, and the way that Orientalism is used and changed by the type of media that Dune produced, and like the way that Star Wars took from Dune, like they're very different beasts, but the way it took from Dune with like Luke Skywalker's like more, I don't know, maybe more probably more Orientalist than Dune ever was, because it replaces, like, it creates this desert environment. It creates these, like, Star Wars creates these like indigenous people, sand people, who are barbaric monsters compared to this white character who is a hero. And you compare that to Dune, where like the people who live in the desert are a complex culture. Sure, their religious traditions have been foisted onto them by an imperialistic group, like, yeah, the Sand People, yeah. Like, sure, the Bene Gesserit are the ones that created the Dunes, the Dune Fremen's religion, and that's like, that in itself is Orientalist, in the idea that kind of culture could be implanted in such a way is itself Orientalist, but it's still interesting in the way in which that's sort of mobilized. Far more interesting than, like, I love Star Wars, don't get me wrong, and there's interesting things that Star Wars have done. As a story, the complexity of it is it's like a finger painting in comparison. Anyway, let's change up the music, and then we can change up the topics. So while I'm putting on some tunes, think of questions and shit that you want to ask, stuff that you want me to talk about. That's kind of chill. I like that. That feels like chill vibes. Alright. Oh yeah, see, that was my... That was my other I understand why they did this. I still think it's a cowardly mistake, but that they didn't use Arabic and they didn't call it like jihad, like the holy war. That they didn't call it jihad is just cowardly. They should have just called it jihad. I understand why they didn't, and why American audiences wouldn't appreciate it, and why American studios wouldn't let that pass. But it is a detriment to the movie that they don't call it jihad. Yeah, not calling it jihad is a big mistake, and I think not calling it jihad, I think that is a part of the movie which will be cited as the movie ages as a major detriment. Like I feel like the longer away from 9/11 that movie moves, the further away from 9/11 that movie moves, the more people will be like, oh, obviously they should have just said jihad. Like, obviously that should be like, if you're worried about the particular narratives of white saviorism, of like imperialism, which people don't get in the lay audience, then using jihad and stuff like that is obviously going to be valuable for communicating these messages. And if you're worried about like the particular kinds of Orientalism at work, obviously just stripping the trying to strip back that Orientalism doesn't work, because it's part of the product. And I feel like the stripping back of the language of like calling it jihad and things like that are I think Denis Villeneuve understands a lot more about Dune than other people did. I think he understands the source material, but the stripping back of that is a misunderstanding, I think, of why it's an interesting piece of art. Not necessarily what Frank Herbert wanted from it. I think it's an interesting piece of art because of that type of Orientalism, and I think stripping it away makes it less interesting. I think it would be more interesting, like even just on an aesthetic level, and not to say that on an aesthetic level that's the most important thing, but even on an aesthetic level, to see someone like Timothée Chalamet, this sort of fucking Victorian twink boy Timothée Chalamet calling for global jihad, is a much more aesthetically interesting image than Victorian twink boy Timothée Chalamet talking about holy war, and they have very different connotations in terms of the audience. So I do think that is a major detriment to the film as well. Alright, was there anything else that I was going to talk about? Was there anything else on my mind? Oh, I was going to talk about the next video, that's right. So the next video is going to be on Ecocide. I can't remember if I'd landed on whether it was going to be on Ecocide or Family Abolition in the last stream, but I decided on Ecocide. And the one of the major benefits of doing a video on Ecocide is that my supervisor is an actual, like, full-on expert on Ecocide. He is a consistently cited expert on Genocide and Ecocide. So I can talk. I'm going to send the script to him before I actually publish it, to get some like expert academic consensus on the value of the work, which is useful. I've not had the ability to send a script to an actual to a friend who's an expert before, which is useful, at least in the term an academic expert. And so the video is going to basically, I'm going to put up the plan for it in the next few days for patrons, which is going to, I won't say it's expanding it all here, because patrons need to have some of that sweet access stuff, or else why are they patrons? But essentially the structure of it is going to be talking about, in the part one, talking about the sort of history of Ecocide as a concept, because Ecocide was enunciated as a concept in relation to Vietnam, Agent Orange use in Vietnam. So I'm going to start in that sort of institutional history, connect it to the way in which herbicide, which is the other word for ecocide that was used, is being used and has been used in Palestine for a long time. And I'm gonna use Palestine as an essential sort of case study, because I think it's very, not only because it's relevant, but because it's very useful for understanding ecocide, the various dimensions. So the first part we'll be talking about the sort of herbicidal aspect, Agent Orange and types of warfare like that, in the warfare context. Second part is going to look at the notion of ecocide as a process of genocide. So ecocide originally was used to talk about damage to the environment, also somewhat used to discuss damage to the environment, which also has the effect of killing people. But subsequent research, this is where the stuff that my supervisor was really known for, subsequent research examining ecocide examines it within the context of genocide. Genocide being in that notion of genocide as being not just a legal understanding, but as a colonial process that Raphael Lemkin and then later Patrick Wolf built on, as like the destruction of a particular national pattern, the destruction of a genos, of a type of people, and the imposition of another type, another genos on top of that, another national pattern. And a lot of the time this has been, in terms of ecocide, this is very clear in terms of things like resource extraction. So the way in which extreme energy goes into indigenous lands, appropriates indigenous lands, destroys those lands, destroys the ability of indigenous people to maintain their cultural distinct identity in relation to those lands because of the imposition of a new form of basically capitalist resource extraction. And that's consistent with the ways in which resource, scrambles for resources happen as part of settler colonialism. So in the third part, building on that, we're going to take Palestine as an example of both of these forms of ecocide, as both the herbicidal warfare and as the colonial. It won't be as much extractivist for extreme energy, but things like the destruction of orange orchards as part of Israeli settler colonialism, the stealing of water as part of Israeli settler colonialism, and the disruption of the relationship between the land and the people that Israeli settler colonialism has created. And I think that's really good for illustrating how it's not just when we talk about the relationship between the land and a people. A lot of the time, I think particular kinds of people get scared off by the notion that there is like a sort of metaphysical, like, spirituality. And I'm not saying that there isn't a spirituality, but they get hung up on the notion of spirituality as the essential feature of a connection between an indigenous people and land. And it's not necessarily like a spirituality in the sense that evokes, but in just like an accumulated form of cultural practices and how people engage with land. And the orange trees in Palestine are a really good example, because it was a way in which indigenous Palestinians related to the land via their agriculture and via the economic sort of relations that they were embedded within. Between different parts of Palestine, between Gaza and between what would later be the West Bank, it was a symbol of unity. And the destruction of that is a destruction of the ability of those groups to maintain that identity and maintain that connection. So I think that's a really good example of the specific ways in which these ecocidal logics are at play. And so basically, that's the structure. That's what I'm going to go into further detail and depth about in the next video. Hopefully we'll be out in the next 2 weeks or so. But I have another, after visiting my supervisor today, he obviously recommended like 4 new books. So I've got some more books to read, and then we'll get to writing it. Jihad also has connotations with the Muslim word that's relevant to the use of the word Dune. Yep. How much, What's Up Dog is asking, how much of poli-sci studies, teacher-students topics, are inherently bourgeois? Wondering because my cousin got his PhD in poli-sci, but I don't know how he understands the world. So poli-sci as a discipline tends to be more conservative, which is a function of a few different things. A lot of political science is concerned with the institutions in which politics happens. So a lot of the time it's concerned with like the institution of the state, the institution of political parties, the institutions of trade unions, and it's interested in how these institutions interact with each other. And that lends itself to a particular sort of static understanding of the world, where we assume particular structures exist, and this extends to like foundational political philosophy. So a really good example would be probably the most famous, not quite contemporary, but modern political theorist is John Rawls. John Rawls's political theory assumes a state as a basic unit of organizing society. And you don't have to be an anarchist to point out that, well, that's an assumption that we don't necessarily have to make. A state is a particular, historically specific institution. And so assuming the existence of a state is making a bunch of assumptions about what the world should look like. That's a normative judgment as much as it is an assumption. And that's quite endemic within a lot of political science thought. But that doesn't mean that someone who has a PhD in politics or political science or whatever they call it is necessarily bourgeois or is necessarily fucking like right wing. To be honest, every institution, every discipline is bourgeois. Like the university is a bourgeois system. Schooling is a bourgeois system. We have to make judgments upon that to then understand what we're making of those systems. I mean, some people would argue that the university is more of a feudal system, but those people would be wrong. But like it's these disciplines are found like they're foundationally bourgeois, and there's no real way to escape that. It doesn't mean that you can't do radical work within them, but the disciplines themselves are necessarily looking at the world in a particular way. Like both of my PhD examiners were, one of them was definitely a communist, an old school communist. One of them was, at the very least, socialist. At the very least, left socialist. Don't know if he would describe himself as communist. Both of them were in politics. They were both poli-sci departments. So when you're talking about like people in these departments, that I don't want to end up in I could end up in a politics department. I don't want to because they tend to be more right wing. It is a bourgeois institution in its core. Mithra was saying I'm a bit of an eco nut. So war effects on indigenous fauna is something that interests me deeply. Yeah, I'm interested in like the impacts of war are interesting, but war is never a thing in and of itself. War is an expression of something else. Like, people don't go to war for no reasons. War is an expression of underlying logic, underlying ideas. So, if you were to describe the current genocide in Palestine as war, you would have to then understand that the reason for that genocidal war is settler colonialism, and then there are a bunch of other logics at play as well. The impact of imperialism is a focus. Yep, imperialism, colonialism. So a lot of the work on ecocide and genocide has focused on. It's been very influenced by degrowth stuff, and eco-imperialism stuff. So. Obviously everyone knows that some of the most immediately affected groups by global warming, are indigenous groups, whether that's through the increased extraction, extreme energy extraction in their lands, or the increased effects of global warming on their lands themselves without necessarily extracting existing. And these are all impacts of like wider eco-imperialism. I will probably not. I won't go into it. It won't be a long treatise on eco-imperialism necessarily, and I mean that in the sense that it won't be an examination of the. There will be some degree of this in the video, but it won't be a full examination of the logic of imperialism manifest throughout the world in terms of global warming, because I want to focus on Ecocide within a case study specifically. I obviously will to some degree mention the wider context, but I think the Palestine case study for understanding what ecocide is very useful, and that brings in global warming as well, because the ways in which Palestinian agriculture has been influenced by global warming are very readily apparent, and the, like, in terms of like the wider genocide that's going on, it's very readily apparent. It's like, I could do a video on ecocide that focused on resource extraction and that focused on the logic of accumulation as intensifying resource extraction and producing eco-imperialism, producing global warming and all of that, and it would be a fine video, and it might be something that I talk about in another time, but I want to use the Palestinian case because I think it's relevant, and I think it's a way to one, talk about ecocide, two, maintain in people's consciousness that Palestinian genocide is ongoing and it is not slowing down, it is only getting worse, and three, to talk about that in a way that I don't feel like is exploitative of that situation, and in a way which is grounded in creating a better, more fuller understanding of how this genocide has been going on for longer than the few months since October 7th, but for decades. So I think that's how I kind of want to think about it. No, Mithril, I didn't think you were. That was my general reflections on the idea of war. I think that the general reflections on the idea of war are a lot of the, like, I think generally people, not you specifically, but there is a tendency to view war as a specific thing and not just an expression of underlying logics which then explode into violence. And this is true of war and of genocide studies as well. Obviously, part of reading about this and researching ecocide is more fully reading up on genocide as a topic, which is also, you know, one of my bits and bobs jobs that I'm doing to make ends meet is marking and teaching on a genocide course. And part of that is maintaining an understanding of genocide. You can't teach a course without understanding it. You can't mark essays without understanding it. And part of that has been... I'm really sorry for being so yawny. Part of that is understanding that the state of the field of genocide studies, and to some, like, for a long time, it's less the case now, but for a long time, the state of the field of genocide studies has been genocide as like an aberrant sort of feature of the world, something that has been separate to the societies in which the genocides originate from. Not, this isn't 100% the case, and there's big trends pushing against it, especially recently, especially since the 2000s, and especially in terms of people who are interested in indigenous studies and interested in, like, in the case of Palestine, because it leaps to my head again, like Nakba studies and things like that. But a lot of the time, discussions of genocide studies have been very legally focused and very focused on what is called like a Holocaust-centric understanding of what genocide is, whereby, and more specifically, it's often Shoah-centric, whereby the specific project of genocide against Jews by the Nazis is understood as the paradigmatic understanding of genocide. And everything else which does not meet that level of paradigmatic understanding gets dismissed as not genocide. And part of that is a function of the legal understanding which was brought in, and part of it is which brings in and focuses on intent and special intent as the prime idea of genocide. Like, genocide requires special intent. This is a legal idea which is not present in the original writings of Raphael Lemkin. Special intent does not particularly feature in his original work, but it has become the central thing that most discussions of genocide operate around. And you see that in the ICJ case. Major part of South Africa's case was trying to demonstrate that there is some degree, and in this case, remembering that the ICJ case was about establishing that there is plausible cause for the Genocide Convention to be in play, not necessarily proving that it was. But a big part of their case was to show to a plausible degree that there is special intent. That was a big part of their case. And if you look at my video on genocide, I talk about in very, very similar terms the way that the South African ICJ case brought that forward. But that's the assumption that special intent is the thing that causes genocide, and the assumption that intent is necessarily demonstrated by saying, here's a document that says I want to do these things, is a legal fiction which isn't held up within legal philosophy. So you've got two problems with the special intent case in terms of genocide. If we're sticking, the first one is sticking with the legal understanding. So sticking with the legal understanding, the first problem is much of the time when we talk about special intent, people who argue in favour of special intent being the prime genocidal idea invoke murder as a criminal case. They say you can't prove murder without intent, otherwise it's just homicide. But that's not true. The problem is that's just not true at all. A lot of the time, murder, and this in the case of America especially, murder can be committing an act with an intent and without fully considering the effects of that intent. You could have murderous intent. Say you murdered the wrong person. The intent to murder would still be there, but you wouldn't have been intending to murder that person, so you could still be convicted of murder. Or you could be not adequately considering the effects of your actions, and those could you could be charged with murder. And in a lot of cases, legal theorists for a long time, this is a long debate, goes back to 30s, the 1920s. The idea of murder, intent to murder, is very difficult to prove. So it's proved by understanding the actions, not even you don't need someone to be like, yes, I intended to murder. You look to understand the actions of the individual involved, and then you understand whether that is intentionally murder. But for some reason, I say for some reason, for a very obvious reason, that has not been translated into international law regarding genocide and regarding intent. So it's much harder to say this state intended to kill these people, and we can show that by the actions that they're taking. Say, by starving them, by bombing them for 6 months. These actions are clearly indicative of an intent to murder, in whole or in part, a specific ethnical group. Religious, the various different qualifications that the Genocide Convention has. But for reasons that are related to the fact that lots of states don't want to be challenged that they are committing genocide, that has become a target which has shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and made the charge of genocide harder and harder and harder to make. So that's like a major problem. I forget how this whole thing started, but that's a major problem with the Genocide Convention. The second aspect to challenge the problem with understanding things as genocide at this point is obviously the fact that genocide exists beyond the confines of the law. And viewing a thing as extant just because the law exists unmoors it from the sociological and historical moments in which it was created. Raphael Lemkin drafted the Genocide Convention, but he drafted it within a context of opposition. He drafted it within the context of his concept of genocide being muted, being diluted. He was deeply unhappy with the fact that cultural genocide, which to him was probably the most essential part of genocide, was eliminated from the conventions. He bemoaned that. It was the closest thing to his heart, but he just couldn't get it through. He defended it for 2 rounds, and they just couldn't get it through. So in the end, he was like, I need to get this through, and it's all I can. And for Raphael Lemkin, genocide is essentially a colonial. He makes that very clear. Patrick Wolf makes it very clear in his description of colonialism. For Raphael Lemkin, genocide is the destruction of the national pattern of an oppressed group and the imposition of the national pattern of an oppressor. And you can criticise the notion of nationalism and the nationalist focus of that and extend the concept of a people beyond a national group to something like a LGBT group, where we can understand like a specific what's called a genos, which is like a sort of essential aspect of a people. A shared collective identity, a shared collective history, collective memory, and a degree of difficulty in exiting that group. For an LGBT group, that can clearly be the case can be made that is a group within the confines of a genus which could be subject to genocide and then fit within Raphael Lemkin's understanding. Because if you destroyed gay people, bi people, trans people, you're not just killing them, but you're imposing heteronormativity upon them. So that's a particular idea of genocide which is very compatible with, with Raphael Lemkin's ideas. But the people who are obsessed with the legal definition take the Genocide Convention as if it emerged without Raphael Lemkin existing, as if it just appeared. Like, oh, we were handed by God the Genocide Convention. It has no other meaning. So therefore, it is just up to us to just look at these words, which are written in English, so we can understand it like that. And ignore the work of the guy who drafted them. And there's a good line. My supervisor spoke about this in one of his papers, that a number of people have led with the sort of literalist understanding of the Genocide Convention have basically implied that Raphael Lemkin didn't understand the concept that he was bringing forward, which is a really interesting thing to say. Like, you can develop a concept, you can take the concept and be like, this is inadequate in certain ways, so let's develop it to include things. And that's one thing, but to say that the person who created the term didn't understand what the term would subsequently become, or what you understand, like to say that they didn't understand the term as an essential term is bizarre. You could say that, you could make an argument, if you're a strict positivist, to say Raphael Lemkin's understanding of genocide to involve colonialism, to involve all these other things, isn't genocide because of X, Y, and Z. But you can't say it's because he didn't understand the term. That's a bizarre thing. Yeah, I forget. That was a long welcome to my class. That was a long rant about something. And in conclusion, Dune 2 was, I would say, 7 out of 10. Should we do another track? I should probably publish something on Tinfoil Pain. You just missed about a 20-minute rant about my view of genocide, so welcome. I was saying something about the state of the field, and I forget what that was, but I assume we're all illuminated. We'll make another tune, and we'll figure out where to go from there. say to Selma, you did miss the 20-minute rant about genocide. Whether that's the good stuff or not is, I guess, up to you. It wasn't fun. It was me complaining about, I guess, the state of the field. I mean, you know, not to get back into it, but positives of that are like 10 years ago, maybe longer, Ilan Pape wouldn't have understood the ongoing condition of Palestinians as genocide, but having dialogue and been involved with critical genocide studies has come round to the idea that not just the obvious condition of Palestine right now as being a function of genocide, but the longer settler colonial condition. So, you know, there's at least progress with people to some extent. How much that is valuable for the people currently on the ground is dubious. Talking about colonialism, yeah, no, I didn't like the Avatar show. I thought it was bad. I thought it didn't understand what Avatar was. It wasn't good. I watched it because I have no self-control. Unfortunately, I have no self-control. To my credit, I managed to avoid getting into a flame war about the notion that neoliberalism is dead this week, and I think that's progress for me. Because if we want to get into another deep 20-minute long chat about the fact that neoliberalism isn't dead, and we could do that, but it's a waste of time. Nobody wants to hear it. And it's kind of like I used to have more energy for that kind of debate and that kind of work, and I used to think it mattered more. I think it matters whether or not neoliberalism exists at this moment for understanding the particular kind of, for labeling it in a kind of for like collecting it within an understanding of political economy as political economy exists. Neoliberalism still exists within that framework. We can understand particular trends that still exist and are likely to still exist. But a lot of the time the people are talking about like, oh, neoliberalism is dead, what instead we have is these particular policy traits, and those particular policy traits are still consistent with neoliberalism. So, I'm talking about critics on the left. Critics on the right, I don't give a fuck about. You know, oh, neoliberalism has never existed. You know, these people are like, oh, you know, pure market fundamentals. Like, yeah, I don't give a fuck what you're talking about. You're talking shit. You don't matter to me. But when critics critics on the left are like, neoliberalism is dead. Instead, what we've got is a type of, or what is being proposed by the Labour Party in the UK is instead a type of corporatism. Here's some particular policies. And you're like, okay, so within this list of policies that you've identified and within this stage of what you've identified, what are the things that are likely to happen and what are the things that are likely to be lies? Then we can work as a left to oppose these things or not. Doesn't matter if you want to call them neoliberalism. Whatever. They are still neoliberal. If I was producing an academic article and understanding what was going on, I'd be like, to view these deviations that you've articulated, and I am just substituting something that has annoyed me at this point. But if we are just highlighting things like a degree of industrial policy or a degree of directionality in trade rules and government intervention in particular directions, then these are all consistent with decades worth of research into what neoliberalism is. bizarre to ignore them if you were doing that from an academic point of view. If you're doing it for political reasons, sure, that's fine, whatever. But I managed to avoid getting into a flame war, and I think I should be very proud of myself for that. I gave myself a little treat of subtweeting James Ball for that. Subtweeting? No, actually directly tweeting James Ball. James Ball is a fucking fanny. The wigs in Avatar The Last Airbender were very bad, yeah. James Ball, it was the landlord stuff, Sinan. So, I don't know, for Americans who don't know, we have this, Americans, you know, I'm assuming that the two audiences that I have are Americans and British. The two imperial cores. You have Will Stansel. Will Stansel, in his like kind of smug way. I had to block Will Stansel because he was too annoying. He's like a sort of shadow of James Ball, in the sense that James Ball is a British journalist. He used to call himself a data journalist. He doesn't anymore, which is, maybe it's because he doesn't understand data. He called himself a data journalist previously. He's the most smug man on the planet. He writes for a newspaper called The New European, which existed just to support a second Brexit referendum, because he thought that would be useful. Incredibly smug, incredibly annoying, and he basically this week he's been really horrendous on Palestine for a long time, so everybody hates him for a number of reasons, including that. He this week though, The Guardian published an article talking about how the problem with housing in the UK isn't because of a shortage of housing. There is plenty of housing. The problem is because of I can't remember the exact terms that the article argued in favor argued on, but the problem is essentially that landlordism, whether that's corporate landlordism or private landlordism. And James Ball was like, anything that says it's going to be simple is definitely not going to be true. And everyone was also like, okay, well, I like, in the UK we had child labour, and the simple solution to child labour was banning child labour. And that worked. Sometimes, sometimes a simple solution is simple. My friend Luke got into a bit of a beef with him about this, and this is how I ended up engaging with him, despite my best efforts. He's so smug. That's the thing. I need you to understand. He's so smug. His Twitter profile picture is him like this. It's so smug, and it's so annoying. And so I couldn't resist, because he replied to my friend like, banning landlords, whatever that means. And you're like, well, what do you think that means, James? It means that you're not allowed to be a landlord. It means that you're not allowed to own a property in which you rent out to someone else. What do you mean, whatever that means? It's very obvious what that means. Just because you can't imagine a world in which there's no landlords doesn't mean that is a particularly complicated idea, Mr. Ball. Mr. James Ball. It's not a complex idea to be like, oh, you're not you have a house? Okay, you actually aren't allowed to own this house. Oh, you're a corporation? You're not actually allowed to buy up a bunch of housing. You're a corporation who wants to build housing? Sure, you're not allowed to then rent out that housing. That housing has to either be rented out by the local authority or bought by an individual. There is no landlordism. It's not a complicated idea. It's not particular. Oh, what do we do if the landlords that have just one house? What they're gonna be in a terrible situation. Just have the local authority buy it off them. That's not hard. It's not a hard thing to do. They can buy it off them. Council house, easy. This is not complex. This is not a mind puzzle into which a rat has to enter to find the cheese. This is a blank sheet of paper in which you write no more landlords and the problem is solved. Anyway, James Ball's a fanny. Yeah, he is a wanker. And I treated myself to a response to James Ball because I avoided getting into the neoliberalism is dead, endlessly recursive discussion again. If Circles still existed, I'd have been moaning about it on Circles, but it doesn't. I hate that Circles doesn't exist anymore. Alright. Is there anything else that anyone desperately wanted to talk about? Any more questions? Any questions that I missed in the chat that people are interested to hear I'm only about half this ball deep, but I have been drinking before. So if you want some honest answers to some questions, now is the time to do it. Fire them my way. I'll do. This will be the last track that I'm making. I'll make one last track. I'll give you all time to. If you've got any ideas for questions, anything you want me to discuss, shove them in chat, and I will discuss them post this final track. Gonna have to tune the guitar. I think something is off there, but I can't be bothered figuring out what it is. So let's do a wee tune. Yeah, that's fun. I like a nice bit of 70s vibes. Let's turn it up a bit. Yeah, we'll go on for another 10 minutes or so. 70s vibes, yeah. What I will do after this, what I am looking forward to doing. Well, I mean, first of all, I have to do my Duolingo because I cannot let that owl beat me. And by owl beat me, I mean that I cannot let the owl. I cannot lose my streak with the owl, and I will let the owl continue to beat me as I still use his shitty app to try and learn German and Spanish. But I still need to keep my Duolingo streak. I am addicted to the owl. That is my plan afterwards. I then have to watch Dimension 20's new episode, which is a nice vibe to be doing when I'm slightly drunk. I can't get too drunk because I do want to do some. I'm doing some. I don't want to do owl harassment. The owl is harassing me. I do want to go to the gym tomorrow, so I won't. Maybe I won't drink the rest of this bottle. We'll see. I absolutely ruined my legs yesterday because I went to the gym and there was no squat rack available. They'd closed the weight room for some reason. So instead I made the very wise decision to just absolutely blast my legs on every other exercise possible that I could think of. Turns out that wasn't a good idea, and my legs are very sore. So hopefully that won't be the case tomorrow. Yeah, their AI translators is not good. It's not a good thing. I did my big old rant against AI last week, didn't I? That was the other thing I was going to do a rant about tonight was how do I come up with a proper gym routine? I had the benefit of meeting some very muscly men in the gym, and in the swimming pool, because I'm a good swimmer. I used to swim competitively, and someone I met there who was a big gym guy, very muscly. He couldn't swim very well, so I started helping him, teaching him how to swim, and then I met a bunch of them, and then basically I follow the routine that has been embedded within my brain by going to the gym with them. So I have like a 3-day split routine that's been like embedded in my head. It's like, oh, okay, so these are the things that I need to do, and I will do them. I won't vary them very much because I don't want to think about it, but I like doing this stuff. That's basically what I do. I had the benefit of like meeting some nice guys who took me under their wing, and I reciprocally took them under my wing in terms of swimming. It's been nice. I have discovered enjoying. There's a nice like sense of achievement in like and being able to do something that you weren't previously able to do. And in terms of like gym stuff, it's like it's not even like heavy weights. It's things like being able to move your body in a way that you previously couldn't. Like I did yoga for a little bit during the lockdowns, and that had a similar sort of vibe. It's like, oh, I can touch my toes, that's really nice. And it's a similar sort of feeling. It's like, oh, I can move my body in this way that I previously couldn't. And that's the sort of enjoyment that I get out of it. And it has a similar sort of space in my head as well to swimming, where I could just, unlike running I could never switch off if I was running. I could never like drift off into thinking. I would just always think, oh man, I've just got so much distance to go. I've got to think about so much. My brain would keep going. But swimming, I think for swimming it's like, because you're counting laps a lot, you sort of enter a kind of fugue state, and it's like the closest to meditation I can ever get. And it's kind of the same with gym, where it's like, oh, I'm busy counting something with like reps and stuff, so it keeps me occupied and distracted from everything else in a way that other exercise doesn't, and that's very good for me. Like if I'm busy a lot, I need to distract myself. Sinan say my cardio routine has helped my knee. See, that's another reason I had to give up running, is because I have weird hips and weird legs. My legs kind of go like that. They're kind of a weird shape, which makes running very difficult. It's the same with my whole family. If any of us run a lot, we get bad knee and hip problems just because it's just the way that our legs are. So it's something that we can't do for exercise, and I used to do it a lot during lockdowns, and it really fucked up my legs. But it doesn't happen at all with like gym stuff. Yeah, the progress is it's nice to be able to rate the progress. And it's what our gym is doing, actually, which is fucking me off. Our gym is changing the entrance to be facial recognition. Did this without any consultation with any of the people who use the gym. Just announced one day they're going to move to facial recognition pods to use the gym. And obviously that is silly in a number of ways. I don't want to farm out my data, facial recognition data, to a corporation which has no oversight. The security protocols of which I do not know. I don't want that. It's also the case that facial recognition software is incredibly poor for anyone who's not white, and it's particularly bad for black women. So when this eventually comes into force, it was supposed to come in on Tuesday, but not enough people signed up for it, so it hasn't started yet. But when it does, it's going to have a lot of black women. The area I live in has a lot of black people, a lot of black women as well, who are using this gym, and they're not going to be able to access the gym via the facial recognition, because it just doesn't work, because it's a racist system. So I kind of suspect that they're just going to give up with it, and the whole justification for it was like, the whole justification was, in the first instance, they'd had people who weren't supposed to be there gaining entry. They had like one stolen watch, whatever. They had people who weren't supposed to be in there. I don't care about that. A lot of the time, it was mainly like the partners of people who were registered there. Who cares? Who cares about that? But the other reason was so that they could have not have a receptionist on staff. But because the pods that they have for access aren't accessible for families who might want to use the swimming pool, and they're not accessible for disabled people, they still have to have someone on the ground floor of the gym to let people in. But they no longer have a reception. But there's nothing on the ground floor of the gym. The only thing on the ground floor of the gym is the swimming pool, but the swimming pool doesn't have a lifeguard. So there's no reason for someone to be on the ground floor of the gym. So instead, they're just going to have someone who's not a receptionist sitting around the place to let people in. No, this is a much more efficient system. What an efficient system this is, to get a whole load of people to farm out their facial recognition data to a completely unaccountable organisation for no reason except that we are obsessed with cutting costs, even though this is expensive, even though we'll still be hiring the same amount of people as we previously would, but now now someone will just have to sit at a different desk to the desk at which they were sitting previously, so that we can install these racist facial recognition software, and so that we can use these pods which are inaccessible to disabled people and families. It is completely absurd. With no consultation. Like, it doesn't even have to be like the previous way it worked was that you had an account that didn't have facial recognition, that was just like an account, and it was linked to your key fob, and you press the key fob on the turnstiles, and the turnstiles let you through. And I don't understand why that's not good enough. I mean, it is essentially bollocks. But yeah, I won't go on too long about how my local gym is annoying me, because that is not interesting to anyone. We will bring the stream to a close there. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for bearing with me while I was 10 minutes late running back from the pub. I hope you enjoyed the music, the 20-minute rant about genocide, and the 15-minute rant about my local gym. I should see you in 2 weeks. I might actually. One second, Sinan. We might have to actually postpone our D&D, because I think next week I am going to be going up to Scotland for my mum's birthday. I will message you about that. But if not 2 weeks, then 3 weeks I'll be back on stream, and I'll see you guys all then. Thanks for coming on. I'll leave the music going as I always do for a little bit.